Hello everybody and welcome to another coffee break video. This time it's gonna be about network connectivity. So let's dig in. Today I would like to cover a very common scenario where we have a client application that is talking to an external service. And in such case, the application should know when the API is actually reachable, which means when the device is connected to internet. Because if it's not connected because of some outage or Wi-Fi not being available, the application will either crash or it will fail communicating with the API. So for example here, I have the refresh button which simulates communication with an external service. But if we disconnect the device now, the application will eventually crash. And that's because it cannot reach the API, so it will time out, then throw an exception, and then it will crash. So much better user experience would be if the application was detected the networking changes and then behaved in such a way that the user would know that some operations are not available. For example, refreshing the UI or getting some new data. So for these scenarios, the Network Information API is ideal. This API is available in WinUI, and by extent, it's also available in UNO platform. So it's available on all of the platforms that UNO platform can target. So I will write here Network Information, and Network Information class has Network Status Changed event. This event can tell you when you are connected or not. So if I now subscribe to this event, this handler will be called at any point when the network status changes. So in this place, I can adjust the UI to reflect for that. Actually, I will create a separate method which will be called update state. And in this method, I will be performing the necessary changes. So I will call it here. And to make sure that we handle the initial state, I will also put it here on navigated to. So when we first navigate to the page, it will check for connectivity and adjust the UI accordingly. So now in the update state method, I can check for the connectivity and either enable or disable the refresh button. One important thing is that the network information network status changed event is triggered on a background thread. So we cannot directly manipulate the UI here. So instead, we need to use the dispatcher. So I will say dispatcher queue, which is a property on the page. And there I will call try enqueue method, which takes a handler. And now everything in this handler is running on a UI thread. So there I am safe and I am able to communicate and change the UI. So now I will do the following. I will first get the connectivity profile, which is network information, get internet connection profile. And next up, I will call get network connectivity level, which will give me the level of connectivity for this specific profile. In this case, it's for internet, so I am able to see if I'm connected or not. So if the level, or maybe I can do it even more easily if I write refresh button, which is our button, our right is enabled. And then I will set it either to true or false based on the connectivity. So I will say level equals either internet access, which means that I'm connected to internet, or the other values, which means that the connection is limited. So ideally, you want to check if we are able to connect to the internet, or we are able to connect to the internet with constrained internet access. And this is specifically useful for the cases where we are on a metered connection. So it means when we are on a mobile connection which uses up our internet quota, so we need to be mindful about using the internet access. So when the level is set to constrained access, it means that we should be mindful about using it. So this way we can check if the connectivity is available, and based on that enable the refresh button. So if I now run the application, we should be able to see that the button will be at the beginning disabled because we are now on airplane mode. Oh, we made a small mistake here. Yes, this is quite important. The profile can also be null, which happens when there is no internet connectivity. So we need to do something like this, where we say none. So we check if the profile is actually available, and if it's not, we will default to none. So this is the proper way to do it. So let's run it again. And what's gonna happen is that the application will have the button disabled by default. So we can see the refresh button is disabled. And when I now switch from airplane mode to Wi-Fi, you will see the refresh button enable itself right away. So now it's enabled, I can click it, get the response from the fake API. And when I now disable airplane mode, enable airplane mode again, you can see the refresh button is set to disabled. So this is a very simple implementation that is very useful to give the user the information that something is not available, and it's much better than either crashing the app or giving some non-readable error. And because UNO platform runs everywhere, we can do the same thing on all the platforms. So I have here the same application running on Android. When I click refresh, you can see that the time has changed. And if I now set airplane mode, you can see the button is disabled. And again, when I disable airplane mode, I'm getting the button back. So that's for Android. And just for completeness, I will show you also WebAssembly, where you can see the same UI. And if I click refresh, the time is updating. And if I now go to airplane mode, the refresh button is disabled. So again, this API works everywhere. But there is an important thing that I need to mention, and that's that for mobile platforms, specifically Android, we need to add an additional capability, which is done in the Android manifest. Specifically, we need to write this uses permission access network state, which enables the application to actually query for the network status. This is fully explained in the documentation, so you can check there and copy paste the value. I will link to this documentation in the description of the video. Finally, one very important thing to remember is that when we subscribe to an event, we should also unsubscribe when appropriate. So in this case, when we have on Navigated 2, if we subscribe to the network information, which is a static class, the page will forever stay in memory. So we need to make sure that on Navigated from, we the same way just take the handler and unsubscribe from it, so that we no longer keep the page in memory and it can be garbage collected when necessary. So thank you for joining for this coffee break. I hope you enjoyed it and also got something useful from it. Make sure to subscribe to get notified about future videos, and in the meantime keep coding, and I will see you in the next video.